Hello everyone, my name is Thiago. I'm one of the members of the Moonlight Game Squad. In this first tutorial, we will learn how to create a basic endless runner, and then we will further develop this on the following tutorials. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is to create a new project. Okay. So in here you have to select the folder where you want to save the project. Then you will have to select whether you want 3D mode or 2D mode. We will select the 2D mode for now, and then you can select multiple packages. For this tutorial we won't select any. We will first create a folder and we will call it scenes. Okay. Then we will create a new folder, which we will call prefabs. Then we will create another folder. We will call it, for example, animations. And then the last one, we will call it scripts. Now that we have all of our folders created, we will have to save the scene. Okay, so we go to File, Save Scene. Okay. Just give it a name. Select the folder and give it a name. Okay, so we will just call it, for example, main scene. And there we go. So if we expand the scenes folder, you will see our main scene. Okay. So the next thing we will do is basically import some assets. Okay. For this, we will use the asset store. Okay. Just go to the asset store. It might take a while to open. So once you get to the asset store, you can see that you have a lot of assets that you can download, ones that are free, other ones that you can buy. Okay, so we will use some assets that are free. So just go to top free. Okay, just select simple assets. Okay. Your experience might be different if it's the first time. My experience is that I see the import button. Okay, maybe you will see download, the download button also, so you have to download it. Because I've already downloaded the files, I only need to import. Okay, so in a couple of seconds you will see a new window with all the assets that I can select. You can see there are a lot of assets that we can select, but for our simple game, we will just select the 2D. Okay, so just press the button None and select the 2D assets. Okay, just select the OK button, and the assets will be imported in just a couple of seconds. Once they are imported, you can close this window, the asset store window, and go back to the Unity window. Okay, you see a new folder called sample assets with a 2D folder inside with a lot of assets that you can use. Now that this is done, the next step is to add, start adding some pieces to our platform. Okay, so just select the sprites folder and just drag and drop one of the blocks to the canvas. Okay, so now you see that you have a canvas, a block, sorry. Then reset the position to reposition the block in the center. Now we have to do one little thing, which is add the box collider. Okay, so just add a new component, select the box collider. Okay, you can see if we don't select the mesh renderer, you will see that the box collider stays around the block. So now we need to create a couple more, so just copy and paste some of the blocks to create a real platform. Okay. You can duplicate the block, for example, or you can use Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V to copy and paste the blocks, and then just change the X value of the new block, okay, to reposition it on the right or on the left of the other block. The actual width for this block is 255, so we will choose the X based on this value. Well, a little bit smaller, so we will choose like 2.5 to the right, minus 2.5 to the left, okay, and so on until we have the final platform, okay. Once we do, we will create a game empty object, empty game object, sorry, so we can define what our platform is. So this new object, we will change the name to platform 1, and this new object will contain all of the blocks that we created previously. So we just need to select them and drop them to the platform, okay? And now we have our platform object that we can move as one, okay? So let's just place it a little bit to the bottom, okay? So we have a little bit more screen to work on. But we are not finished yet. We need to add this platform to a layer, okay? So we will create a new layer called ground, okay? And once we go back and select the platform, we can now add it to the ground layer, okay? This will be very useful. Now that we've created our platform, we will need to create the player. So in order to do so, we need a new empty game object. Okay? So just use the same option that you used when creating the platform. Just change the name to player, and we will use the assets that we downloaded from the asset store, and we will use 2 squares. Okay. So for the first square, we will change the scale. We will scale it just to a little bigger. We can use 2 for X and Y, or maybe a little less. We don't want our player to be huge. So imagine that this is the player's body. Okay. Now we need a head. So we will use another square that we will put on top of the other one. So we will change the color first. We will scale it a little bit down so we can really understand what is the body and what is the head. We will place it on top of the other one, and well, we got our player. Now we just need to place it on top of the platform. So just use the arrows to place it where you want the player to be. Now we have our player with a fancy design, but we still need to add some components to it. So first of all, we will add a box collider, okay, and we need to reposition it and scale it so we can define the boundaries for this player and know when it touches another component on the screen. Okay, so just change the numbers. You will see that probably my numbers are really different from yours. It depends on the size, but it depends on where you put the object. But just define a collider around it. Okay, you will have something like this. The next thing we will have to do is basically add a rigid body 2D. Okay, this will allow us to have gravity on our player. So once we add movement to it, you will notice that he always goes back to the ground. Okay. Another thing we will need to add is a script. Okay, not these ones. You need to create a new script. We will call it, well, you can call it whatever you want. I will call it character move. Okay, you can select from 3 different languages, but I will use the C# to do so. You can see the new script in the Assets Explorer, but we need to put it in the correct folder. So just drag and drop it to the scripts folder, and select the player again. Once you select the player, you will see the script. Just double click it and you will open your favorite editor. Okay, in my case it's Visual Studio, but it can be MonoDevelop, for example. You can see that the script is automatically created for you with a couple of methods, start and update. But for now, we won't use these methods. The one we will need to use is fixed update. Okay. Fixed update returns nothing and receives nothing as a parameter. So what we'll do here is basically apply some movement to our player. So for that we will use rigid body 2D and apply some velocity. Okay. So we just need to write rigid body 2D dot velocity, and this equals a vector 2, and you basically say what is the x value, okay, and the y value. For the x value, we will create a new variable called speed, which we will allow the developer to define on the Unity interface. So we need to create this variable speed. So we will define it as public float speed and give it a default value. Give it a default value that we can change then in the editor. Now, if you save and go back to Unity, you will see that below our script, you will see another property. Okay, it's speed, which you can define. You can change the value very easily. Okay. Just leave it as it is. And now for the real deal, we have to test it. So just push the play button on the top, and you will see our player falling off the platform. Okay, so it seems that it works. On the game window, if you select the maximize on play button and just push the play button, you will see that it runs in full screen also. One thing that you probably noticed is the camera doesn't follow the player, so we need to do it. So first thing is to define the player tag as player, okay, and then we will have to select our camera and add a script to it. Basically, the logic behind the camera following the player. So add new script, just give it a name. We will use C# again. Once you define the name, you will see the script in the Assets Explorer. Just drag and drop as you did before to the scripts folder and double click it so we can edit the script. Just say reload. For the camera, we will use the start and the update methods. The first thing we need to do is to get our player. So we will declare a variable, transform player, okay, and then we will define a public float horizontal offset that will allow us to give a little bit of an offset to the player. Okay. We will only use the horizontal because we will only follow the player in the x-axis. Okay. Then we will have to get our player. Basically, we will do it by using the game object and we will use the method find game object with tag, and we will define the tag as player. Okay, we did this previously, and now in the update method we will define a new x position to the player, to the camera. Okay, so we will get the player position, player.position .x, and now we will apply a transform to the camera. So transform.position equals to new vector 3 and we will pass as parameters the new x value, so x plus horizontal offset, the new y value that is basically the same, and we will give it minus 10, for example, as the value for z. Okay, let's save it. We go back to Unity, and you will see below the script there is the horizontal offset that you can define. Okay. So we'll save the scene, and you can play it. So now you see that our player still falls, but the camera follows it. Of course, you can always run in the minimized mode. Okay, you can see the player falling. Okay, and now that we have our basic player running, we will need to add some extra actions like jumping and stuff. Okay, so basically we will create a new empty object, empty game object. We will change it to ground check. Okay, we will call it ground check, and we will basically put it below our player. Between the ground. Okay. By doing this, we will have something that will let us know when the player touches the ground. Okay. So we will put it inside the player. Okay. Just reset so we can reposition it in the middle of the player. And now, now with the ground check selected, just reposition it to the bottom of the player. And there is one thing that we need to change, the visibility. Okay, so just select like orange, for example, and now we always see our empty game object. So for now, let's just save the scene, and we will need to add an animation. Okay, basically you can do it by right-clicking the animations folder, create animation. Okay. Just give it a name. We'll call it jumping, for instance, and just drop it to the player. Okay. Once you do, you will see that a new object is created below the animation, which is an animator. Okay. This will allow you to basically define the animations for your player. Okay. Then just open the animator window. In there you will see, if you select the player, you will see the animations inherited by the player. So you can see jumping in there. Okay. And there is another window that is very valuable to the animations, which is the animation window. So if you select the player, you will see the animations associated with it. So now we have jumping. So we will create a very simple animation, which is basically on 1 second. Okay, we will be at minus 360 degrees. Okay, so this will, if you play it, you will see our player rolling around. Okay, let me just fix this. Okay, now we are ready to go, so you can play around with this, and you will see the animation flowing. Now let's go back to the animator window, and let's define a workflow for our player. Okay, so basically we will have to select the jumping state. We will create a new one, which is running. That will be the default one. Okay, so let's rename it to running. This will be the default one, so set as default. And let's start by creating the workflow. So just right click on the first state, make transition, and just drop it on the running state. Then we will create a new transition to the jumping state, and here you will see a condition. Okay, you will see the exit time, but we don't want the exit time to be the condition. We want a new parameter, so we will define a new parameter called jumping, which is a boolean, So once this jumping parameter is true, we will move to the jumping. We'll move to the jumping state. Okay, but now we have to go back. So we create a new transition and drop it on top of the running state, and we will define it the exit time as 1 second because our animation takes 1 second. Next, we need to save our scene. So file, save scene, and just select the player. We need to change the script. So select the player, double click it, and let's add some action. Now we will need to add some variables. We will start by adding a transform, which is the ground check, basically the object that we created previously. Then we will need to add some overlap radius. Basically, it's what defines if we are touching the ground or not. It will be used to detect the collision. Then we will add layer mask. This one, layer mask, which is defined to know what is ground. Okay. So remember when we defined a variable, when we defined a layer on the platforms. So this is it. Then we will need to know when the player is grounded. It's a Boolean variable that we will define as false by default. Then the jump, which is also a Boolean to know when we are jumping. Okay, now we need to know the jump force. Okay. This will be a public variable, so we can change it inside the Unity. Okay. We'll define it as 600. Now let's, for example, add a double jump. Okay. This will allow the player to know when the player is double jumping or not. We'll define it as false. And finally, we need the animator. Okay. This is what will allow us to run the animation. Okay. So we have all of our variables defined. Now we will need the start and the update methods. So let's create the start method. Okay. In here, we will get the ground check variable, which is basically a transform. We can just do transform.find and search for ground check, which is the name of our object inside Unity, and then the animator, which we can get by using the get component method, and give it the animator. Okay. So this will get the animator for this player. Now we need to create the update method. In the update method, we will only check if the player is pressing the space bar or not, because that's the key code for jumping. Okay, so you can use the inputs.getKeyDown to pass the parameter as keycode.space, so it's our space bar on the keyboard, and if so, we will define jump as true. Then all the code that is left is basically inside the fix update method. Okay, so let's get some space here. Okay, the first thing we will do is check if the character is grounded. Okay, so let's just add some comments here so I know what I'm doing. And then we will check if we are grounded. Okay, and we can do this by checking if we are overlapping the ground or not. Okay, so we will use the physics 2D library, and we will call the method overlap circle. We will pass the parameter as ground check dot position. Then overlap radius. You know that this is basically the radius that will tell us that we are touching the ground or not. And then what is ground? Okay, our variable, our layer mask that defines what is the ground. Okay, So then we will reset double jump when we are on the ground. So this is something we have to check. So we are not always jumping. This is not that kind of game. Okay, so we will check if grounded. We will define double jump as false. Okay. Now we have to determine if the player can jump. Okay. So we need to know if he is not double jumping, basically. If he's not double jumping and he is grounded. Okay. He's on the ground. So we will define a boolean that we can call can jump, and we will check if he's grounded or if he's double jumping. Okay. Okay, now we know when we can jump, and now we will define the jumping animation. We will check it to true or false based on the condition above. Okay, so we will use the animator and the method set bool to say that well, our jumping parameter is true or false. Okay, this is basically how you send messages to the animator. And now, well, let's create the logic to jump. Okay, so if we can jump, okay, we will give some properties to the rigid body. Okay, rigid body dot velocity equals new vector, and we will pass a new x value. So rigid body dot velocity dot x, okay, and then the y value is 0, okay, and now we will have to add some force to it. So we will use the same rigid body 2D dot add force. We'll pass a new vector 2, then we will define the x-axis as 0 and the y-axis as jump force. Okay. Now we need to check if we are grounded or not. If not, we will set double jump as true. Okay. Okay. So we just need to change one more thing, which is setting the jump variable to false. Now, if I haven't forgotten anything, let's just clear this space. If I haven't forgotten anything, this should work. So let's save it and go back to Unity. Okay. And we will see some variables below our script button. So there is still one thing we need to do is define the layer mask to ground, and we should be set. So let's just save scene, and now, well, let's try it. Okay, something wrong. There's something wrong with this. So one thing you need to do in the animator is basically set the root motion to false. Okay, let's try it again. Okay, so we are jumping, but well, we are jumping very high, aren't we? So the thing we need to do is basically go to Edit. Okay, we need to go to Edit, Project Settings, and Physics 2D. Okay, this is what we need to change. And there is a value for gravity. We'll set it to -20, okay, because our jump force is very high. So we will define it as -20. And now when we jump, you can see that we can double jump. Now our player is finally complete. Okay. So we won't need to add any changes to the player's script for now. Okay. So, but we need to create the logic behind the platforms. So in order to do so, we will add two empty objects inside the platform. Okay. And we will call it spawn location and the other one spawn trigger. Okay. So just rename the empty object, drop it inside the platform. Okay. One will be at the end of the platform, which is the spawn location, and this will be used for the platforms to appear. We'll just set the value, the Y value to 0, and we'll give it a color, the same we did to ground check, and just let's just create a new empty game object. Okay, and let's just add it, just rename it to spawn trigger and add it inside the platform as we did previously. Change the reposition it and change the color. So this spawn trigger will be used to basically to let us know when we should launch another platform or not. Okay, so this might need some tweaking, but let's just put it there. One thing we'll need to add is a component to this object, which is the collider, okay, box collider, and we will define the property isTrigger to true. Okay. We will need to do the same for the spawn location. Okay. Basically, we want to handle when something hits them, and you will see why in a couple of seconds. So let's just save our scene before we create something that we'll call the sweeper. Okay, this will be responsible for adding the new platforms. Okay, so we will add a quad for this one. First, we will reset it so we can reposition it somewhere else. And then we will change the scale in the y-axis to 20. Okay, so we'll have a large sweeper. Okay, if you zoom it, now you see that the sweeper will pass through our platform, our whole game, by the way. So the next thing we will need to do is add this sweeper, add a component to this sweeper, basically a box collider. Okay, so if you take out the mesh renderer, you will see that the box collider is all around the quad. We will set it to true, the isTrigger, so we can add the same logic. Then we will add a rigid body, and of course we don't want the quad to fall, so we will set basically the gravity to 0. Okay, so it will be always on the same y-axis, and finally we will need to add a new script to the sweeper. Okay, we will call it spawn handler, for example. Okay, so let's drop this script to the scripts folder. Okay, let's select our sweeper, and let's start editing the script for the spawn handler. Okay, so just reload it. Okay, but there is one little thing that we need to do in Unity. So let's get back to Unity. Our spawn trigger and spawn location need to have some tags so we can add it on the code. So let's add these tags because they don't exist. Okay, and for the spawn location and spawn trigger, let's just add it to the correct one. Okay, so let's just select the spawn location and the spawn trigger. Okay, so there is one other thing we need to do, which is place the sweeper inside the camera. Okay, inside the main camera object. This will basically, you know, the camera is following our player, so we want the sweeper to follow the player also. So it's the easiest way to do so. Okay. So once the sweeper is inside the main camera, now we can go back to Visual Studio and start editing our script. For this script, we won't need the start nor the update method. So the first thing we will need to have is a game object array, which is the stage collection. Okay, this will handle all our platforms. Okay, and then we will need to have the onTriggerEnter2D method, which returns nothing but receives as a parameter a collider 2D, which is the object that this one collides with. Okay. And the first thing we will need to check inside this method is basically if we are colliding with a spawn trigger or a spawn location. Okay, so we will compare the game object tag to spawn trigger, first case. Okay. Okay, and then we will have to get our stage. Okay, so we can do it by using the other dot game object. Okay. Then we will need to have the location for the spawn location. Okay, so we need to get its transform. So we need to do stage.transform.parent.find spawn location, which is the name of the place we want to basically spawn the platform. Okay, and then we need to instantiate this new platform. Okay, so by doing this, we will select a random stage from our stage collection, which is manipulated from inside Unity. We will see that in a couple of minutes. Okay. Then we will need to choose basically the place where we want to position it. Okay, so we will pass the spawn location dot position. Okay, we will pass another parameter which is a quaternion. This is a concept very used in games. Well, I will not explain it here because it's not intended, but you can use it. You can use it here. You can take it as it is. Okay, so it seems that we have an issue. Okay, let's just let me just finish this line. So we are defining the name for the object. Okay, we'll call it spawn stage, and there is something missing in here. Okay, what am I missing? Oh, of course, it's the position. I need to give it the position. Okay, so we are done for the spawn trigger. Now we need to define what happens when we hit the spawn location. Okay, and when we hit the spawn location, basically what we want to do is to destroy the older platform. Okay, so because we don't want to instantiate 1000 objects, we want to keep only 2 or 3 and delete the old ones. So we can use the method destroy. Okay, we will pass it the object that we want to destroy. Okay, so this is we can use other.gameObject.transform dot parent.gameObject. Okay, and with this we have our platform logic in place. Now, in order to test this, we need to pass the platforms basically to our script. Okay, so in order to do so, we have to define some prefabs. Okay, prefabs are basically components that you can use in your game. Okay, and you can do it by dragging and dropping your platform and player to a folder. Okay, you just drag and drop to the prefab folder, um, the platform and the player. Okay, and then you can see that you have both objects in the prefabs folder. So just drag and drop the platform one to the script. Okay, and you have one platform, which is the platform one. So just save the scene and let's try it out. Okay, you see that the platforms are they appear basically in front of each other with no space between. Remember when I spoke about tweaking the position of the spawn location and spawn trigger? This is it. Okay, so I will do some changes, and you can see, okay, there are spaces in between. Okay, but not anymore. Okay, you need, since we are using prefabs, you need to apply the settings. So just click on the apply button. Okay, so now the settings are in the prefab. So if you jump, okay, you'll see them. Okay, platforms with space in between. One thing you can perceive is that the platforms are appearing while you are playing. So we don't want this to happen. So we need to do a little bit more tweaking. Maybe add some more blocks or change the positions of the spawn trigger and spawn location. Okay, so I will make some changes, but I will do it in fast forward, so we don't so you don't have to spend any time doing it or watching it. You better do it yourself. Okay. Okay, it seems that we are pretty good now. So now we need to create different platforms. So we have only one, so let's just delete it. Since we have it as a prefab, you can delete this platform and just drag and drop the prefab to the screen. Okay, so you can see that it's still there. And well, use your creativity, just add some more blocks, add some different level. Well, use your imagination. Okay, so I will create two other platforms. Okay, I'm just using my imagination on this one, but I will create two more platforms, and we'll see where this ends up. Well, create yourself just one or two more platforms so you can associate them with the spawn handler script and see what the end result is. Okay, so I will use the same fast forward method while creating the platforms. Okay, now that we have created three different platforms, let's just add it to the spawn handler script. So let's just select the two new platforms and drop it inside the spawn handler script. Okay, so now if you play it, you will see not only the first platform but the other two. Okay, so you might have to tweak it again, so you can check if the platforms appear in the wrong side or the right place. Well, this is from now on is just tweaking um, your platforms and your player and all this stuff. Well, I hope you enjoyed this first tutorial from the Moonlight Game Squad team. So just play it, just give us your feedback, leave some comments on the website, well, and give us ideas. Well, contribute to the future of this game. Okay, see you next time.